So hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the first of our March of Coppola events where we're going to be talking about Lost in Translation. I'll introduce the film and the speaker here in a second, but first I wanted to set some groundwork for who we are and what we do. My name is Pete Timmerman. I'm the director of the Webster University Film Series. If you're not familiar with this, the Webster Film Series is St. Louis's only nonprofit movie theater. We've been in operation for 42 years, give or take, a little longer actually, but officially for 42 years. We usually show first-run movies, art house movies, foreign films, repertory films, new restorations, etc., in the Winifred Moore Auditorium, which is on Webster University's main campus in Webster Groves in St. Louis, Missouri. But we can't right now due to the pandemic, of course. We haven't been able to show any movies in person since March of last year, so we're almost at the one-year anniversary of when we've been able to show anything. I can't tell you for sure when that will change. I've had some guesses in the past year, and they've all been wrong, so I'm reluctant to guess now. We are still doing things, as you can see, because you're at one of our things. We have been doing what we call a virtual cinema, where the movies that we would have booked in person, we've been showing online instead. So you can access these movies. Our website is webster.edu/film series, or also you can follow what we're up to on social media on Instagram and Twitter. It's at WU Film Series, and on Facebook, it's at Webster Film Series. But at any given time, we tend to show 1 or 2 or 3 movies in the virtual cinema. You pay to rent them. It's usually $10 or $12, and we get half the proceeds. And then, yeah, I don't know. But like I said, they're the films that we would show in person if we could, and we just can't right now. So as we speak, there's one film in the virtual cinema. It's called Un Film Dramatique. It's a new French documentary. It's made, a new middle school was built just outside of Paris, and it follows the middle schoolers for the first 4 years of that, that school. And the middle schoolers were brought in to help make the film. It probably sounds like revoltingly cute. It's not really revoltingly cute. It's much smarter than it probably sounds like it would be. And also, when the kids aren't operating the camera, most of the cinematography is done by Claire Mathon, who's the woman that shot Atlantics and Portrait of a Lady on Fire and stuff like that. So there's a lot of charms to that film. And then tomorrow, we're opening another French film. So we're gonna have 2 French films in the virtual cinema. The one tomorrow is Keep an Eye Out, which is the new film. I'm gonna butcher his name. It's like Quentin Depew, something like that. He's the guy that made Rubber and Wrong and Deerskin, and he's got a new one called Mandibles that's about to play Rendezvous with French Cinema in New York. But Keep an Eye Out is a weird, he's got a strange sense of humor. He's sort of like I don't know, he's sort of deliberately annoying, which I realize probably isn't a great way to sell the film, but he is really funny. I thought of the film as something like a cross between Mr. Show and Twin Peaks, if you're familiar with those TV shows, or it's also sort of like the Bruno Dumont of Little Quinn Quinn, if you're familiar with Little Quinn Quinn. But anyway, it comes highly recommended from at least me. That is, yeah, keep an eye out. It opens tomorrow. Like I was saying, tonight is the first event of March of Coppola. So next week, we've got Taylor Grunlow on The Virgin Suicides. Taylor teaches in the English department, both here at Webster University and also at Missouri S&T out in Rolla. 2 weeks from now, my colleague Jessica Pierce is going to host a discussion about Somewhere, the overlooked Sophia gem. And then the last presentation is On the Rocks, which is the brand new Sophia film that is, it just came out last year, but the person hosting that event is Dr. Diane Carson, the beloved professor of STLCC Merrimack. But tonight we've got Dr. Dan Yezbick. Dan, I haven't known for that long, maybe a year or so. But he's one of those people who seems to just do everything. It's like a whirlwind of energy. He teaches full-time at St. Louis Community College Wildwood. He teaches part-time at Webster. I think you teach part-time at 8 other colleges or something like that, something like 8. But then also pretty much every time I see him, he plops a new published piece in front of me. I don't know where he finds the time or energy, but I've very much been looking forward to this presentation. And with that, if you have questions, at the end of this presentation, we'll be doing a Q&A, but you can plop them in the Q&A box at any point down at the bottom, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. It's kind of nice to be able to go right into it, so don't worry about doing that mid-presentation. It'll just save us some time later. But yeah, we'll open up for discussion later, but for now, I'll get out of the way and let Dan take the stage. So, Dan?
Well, thank you very much, Pete, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Jessica, for all of your help. Thank you, Webster, for having me. It's going to be wonderful to be here. And most importantly, thank you all for coming on a Thursday night, on a warm and beautiful Thursday night, to sit here and talk about the cold, alienating, polluted world of early 21st century Tokyo, where we talk about all these liminal spaces filled with loss and confusion and uncertainty about self and identity and love. So yes, we're going to have a great time. And I'm really, really glad you're all here with us. So thank you very, very much for joining us. So we're going to start. I love to work with PowerPoint with students, especially because we get to see so many different varieties of views on this film. And this film has generated both a very, very strong and very, very intelligent fan base, and also a very, very strong and very, very intelligent resistance and protest, and actually a pretty strong hate group in some ways. So what that means is it's very powerful and potent cinema, and it's what we're talking about. But when I talk with students, whether I'm talking about cinema or whether I'm talking about international education and intercultural or multicultural awareness, I always like to start with talking about that these terms aren't specific things. So is cinema just the movie you see? Is it the movie that you're streaming during this theater shutting era? Is it the movie that you saw as a kid that you're watching again many times on video? Is it your memories of the movie when you're discussing the movie with other people? Is it the advertising for the cinema? Where does the actual cinema begin and end? Is it the TV spots or the radio spots you heard? And one of the favorite things I love to do is to show students the different kinds of posters that are out there for movies, and say that cinema isn't just the film, it isn't just the director or the actors. Some people don't even know the names of movies. They say, oh yeah, that Bill Murray movie, or oh yeah, that great ScarJo movie over in Tokyo. What's it called? Oh yeah, Lost in Translation. Not everyone is a cinephile, not everyone is a cinefan, but cinema is very spreadable, and it spreads across graphic design and photography and advertising, which is probably obvious to everybody. But if we just look at the variety of just the different kinds of posters used to advertise this film, we can see that we have our two lead stars, our romantic leads, because many people do call this, I think rightly, a romance, but a very off-kilter and unusual romance. Both of them are doing what romantic leads do best, showing off their bodies in a very, very sensual and powerful and glamorous way, and yet not. Bill Murray looks like he needs makeup, and he needs a costume, and he needs some help, and he's giving us that patented Bill Murray glance, but he looks lost and alone and confused. And Scarlett Johansson, one of the most glamorous and interesting and talented actresses of the past 20-30 years, is turned away from us completely, fixated on the cityscape outside. And then in the middle, we have posters that advertise the film, the cinematic experience, the translation, the medial mixture of both American comedy and Japanese culture in very, very different ways. And we see, I really like this one in the middle here with the he and she mixed in with the kanji. It's a really interesting statement of what this film is. And then the other one, this film has very strange taglines. One of the taglines that was used to advertise the movie is "Everyone wants to be found," which makes a lot of sense. And there's a line about that is sort of relevant in the film. And a lot of critics picked up on that theme too, that everyone wants to be noticed. Everyone wants to be discovered, not discovered for fame, but discovered for love. Everyone wants a kind of unconditional love, especially when they're alone in a world or a place they don't understand, or they feel like their loved ones are just disconnected in some way. And here on the poster next to the one with the kanji, we've got just a silhouette of what turns out is Scarlett Johansson, but we don't really know that. And it's Tokyo itself. It's the neon and the neighborhoods and the communities and the urban excess and the massive capitalist advertising that really becomes a major character. One of the ways I like to look at this film is I'm saying it's, a lot of people say it's this great romantic story of an older man and a younger woman who really respect each other, and the film respects them, and that's all true. But it's almost kind of a menage a trois, because what you really have is Charlotte and Bob and Tokyo, or maybe it's just Charlotte and Bob and the hotel itself. The hotel seems to have a very loving and intimate relationship with both of them in the film, and I think that's part of what Coppola is after here. So let's move ahead and have some fun as soon as I get this to work. 1 second, sorry. There we go. We're in and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to introduce you to the films of Sofia Coppola that you'll be seeing for the next several Thursdays. And Sofia Coppola is kind of a fascinating, unique case, because she's not only a maker of media product, she is a media product. And she, of course, fits into that great, great Coppola dynasty of films and music and wine and fashion and photography and all kinds of things. But for those of you who don't know, Sophia herself was actually turned into a beverage, a very, very smart and tasty champagne, which is sort of wrapped up fashionably. It's a low budget champagne. Coppola designed it as a homage to her, and as a statement about her effervescent personality and her unique sense of style. It is also, and Pete doesn't know this, but I know almost as much about the history of alcohol as I do about films, because I worked for a long time as a bartender, and I teach in the culinary arts program at Forest Park sometimes, where we talk about the history of the world through beverages, which is very important. So Sophia the drink is really interesting, not only because it's a cheap and very, very tasty and stylish domestic champagne, but also because it's one of the first champagnes that has been sold in cans. And again, not only is Sofia Coppola a great woman filmmaker and a great filmmaker of international renown, she's also a product. She's part of this hyper commercialized, fashion based, consumable oriented world. So it's interesting to see how that starts off. And if we think about it, how important drinking is to the film, of course, the Japanese obsession with Scotch whiskey is incredibly important. And Suntory, being one of the most pervasive and popular and historically significant whiskey brands in Japan, is the one that they of course bring Bob Harris over to use his status as an American movie star, and they pay him $2 million for these little second spots that he's going to do, and he's not really happy about it. And there's a lot of friction and a lot of tension going on. But Suntory whiskey has quite a reputation for their artistry. So when he says for a fine time, Suntory time, the director gets very intense. We're going to talk about that scene shortly. There is a rich history of the Japanese appropriating whiskey making from the Scots and making their own kind of thing. Japanese whiskey is very highly regarded in the high-end beverage world. They engineer it differently. It has all kinds of complicated layers and flavors and subtext to it, very much like the way this film works. And I'll throw in a little side story here, actually, too. First one is, if you ever watch or see or teach Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca, you turn around and look at the audience, you will see a lot of people suffering, even though it's a great film, because they're people who can't smoke or who gave up smoking or are still smoking, but Casablanca drives them nuts. And it's very hard for them to not want a cigarette when you see these incredible icons smoking and talking sensually and seriously the whole time. The same thing is true for whiskey in Lost in Translation. The drinks, the way they drink, when they drink, the way Bill Murray savors his whiskey at the bar, the way we see her drinking at times, the drinks themselves. I'm not going to have time to get into a lot of that, but the drinks themselves are a whole separate language that Park Hyatt bar culture, very significant. And just to give you an idea, even though he is advertising Suntory, Suntory's high-end whiskey is called Hibiki, which you can see Suntory whiskey underneath. And again, we have the engineering of a drink that is very elegant, very expensive, and very artisanal. The bottles are all famously made in a special way. The paper is handmade, and just so, since it looks like I'm sitting at the Park Hyatt Tokyo right now, I actually brought my bottle of Suntory Hibiki with me that I won't be drinking now, but right after we're done talking tonight, it is Suntory time in the most exciting Bob Harris kind of way. So just to throw that in. And I think it's actually, this might seem a little strange, but I think it's really important that we begin a discussion of Sofia Coppola's films, and especially Lost in Translation, with a statement about commodity culture and a statement about the way she is merged with the idea of fashion and taste and sensuality, and the way she uses that very playfully and very smartly as she's moving back and forth through her cinema, and especially in Lost in Translation. So how do we move from the perkiest, fun, millennially fashionable champagne to a film that is largely about love, but also about isolation and alienation and ennui and confusion and uncertainty, and facing the realities of your expectations, and bringing these two fascinating actors of A-plus caliber together on screen in a script that was only 75 pages long to start with and had very, very little dialogue. It was really all situational, which is very, very unique. And again, we have stars at various points in their career. Bill Murray beginning what is probably the last phase of his career, moving past his very iconic, goofy 70s and 80s comedies and his SNL days into a very different, serious, contemplative, reflective kind of comedy, which works like kind of a boomerang and bites you later. And then Scarlett Johansson, one of the fastest rising stars of the early 2000s, who seems to conquer every role she's in. The film before this that she makes, she blows all the stars off of the screen because her presence is so strong. But here she holds her own. So again, moving from just casual drinks to very, very casual conversations that turn into something unexpectedly profound and unexpectedly complicated. So let's talk for a little bit about Sofia Coppola herself, Cinema Sofia. I'm just going to move this over so I can, oops, sorry. Apologies there. Okay, let's go back. So what is it about Sofia Coppola that makes her probably one of the most interesting American filmmakers of our time? I think it's very safe to say that she has lunged into becoming the pioneer that anyone who loves film is very excited about. So she begins with an early interest in photography and fashion, and also in interior design, decoration, architecture, and she's always interested in globalized media. If you notice, there's a theme of internationalism that runs through most of her films. It's always very, very American, but very American, filtered through French history, filtered through Japanese hyperculture and hyper commodity, filtered through the sort of weird mysteries of the Virgin Suicides, and then what I've done here is thrown in some useful quotes. Like I always tell my students, the great thing about taking a class on film is we do the research, so you don't have to. So I'll build in these quotes as we go, and we'll see just a little bit of what the world has thought about Sofia Coppola moving forward. And I keep trying to move this out of the way. I'm sorry. There we go. That should work for now. All right, good. So many people call her the ultimate insider, born into the famous Coppola dynasty, which is not new to anybody. Muse to Marc Jacobs and married to a rock star. Before that, married to another filmmaker, Spike Jonze. But she uses her celebrity to attack celebrity culture, and especially fashion and commodity culture, but at the same time drawing on an extraordinary network of contacts that goes back generations. So she has this very honest and rich way of being glamorous, but also subverting and undermining a lot of the glamour that's going on. And that leads to a very unique and special and powerful kind of feminist film form that I don't see in many other directors now or ever. So Coppola has a command of film form that lends itself to recreating interior space, to conjuring a tangible and affecting sense of mood and emotion through the everyday. Long takes, close-ups, and languorous camera movements involve us in the moments of her characters' lives while still keeping some distance. And yeah, long takes and close-ups and slow panning camera movements are hardly new, but we've never seen them quite like this. The thing I like about her is she'll do these long takes with a single actor, usually doing very little, asking us through the beautiful exterior she's put out to enter into their interior psychic space. And then just as it seems like they're on the cusp of a decision, whether they're getting up, like Scarlett Johansson stubbing her toe, or whether we're going to have some follow through, or they pick up a phone and make a life choice, we cut to something completely different. So she's always giving us those interstitial moments, those long, drawn out, pregnant pauses, and then pulling us back, which is where we kind of get that kind of distance taking place. And that brings us to maybe I think the most interesting part of her aesthetic. It's an aesthetic that simultaneously invokes foundational gaze theory, comments upon post-feminist concerns about consumption as a feminine ideal, and attempts to mirror the reverse macho tropes of the 1960s, I'm sorry, attempts to mirror and reverse the macho tropes of the 1960s and 70s male auteur movement, which includes her father. And a lot of critics make a big deal about how she, with the anxiety of influence and her moving past her father, or stylistically attacking or castrating her father. If you want to be psychoanalytic about it, you can be. What she does is she's using a lifetime of growing up in Hollywood, and what has become second nature to her, much like other directors like Ron Howard, is that she knows this medium, she knows the audiences, she knows the styles and the forms and the narrative modes and methods so well that she can play with them the way we play with Legos or the way we play games of Monopoly with her family. She has an inherent, almost a kind of genetic knack for messing with film references to other films, many of them being her father's work, but also make them very, very fresh and original. So there's something really special there. And we see that specialness has been rewarded many times over, both commercially and critically. She's the first American woman to receive a Best Director nomination, and only the third female filmmaker to ever do so. And you can see there's been some distance between them. Lena Wertmuller for Seven Beauties in 1977, and Jane Campion for The Piano in 1994. And even though there was a slander campaign that stopped Lost in Translation from getting a lot of attention at the Oscars and having a bigger set of wins, it does win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, which is always kind of an important calling card Oscar to have. Right? And you see her there with her Golden Lion for the Venice Film Festival as well. And this is where we kind of see she also brings this fresh, fair, gender perspective to films and stories and genres and cliches that we've seen a million times. I really like this quote from Joe Queenan from The Guardian. In a Woody Allen movie, and I hesitate even to say his name, in a Woody Allen movie or a Clint Eastwood movie or a Harrison Ford movie or even a Sean Connery movie, the two, meaning Charlotte and Bob, would somehow figure out a way to make this unlikely May-December romance work. It would still be perpetuating those same stereotypes that, yeah, this is okay that this older guy is falling in love with this young girl, and oh yeah, it's consensual, so it's cool, right? But Coppola has loftier aspirations. She wants to make a film that does not drown in motion picture cliches. Coppola uses the form of the film in two opposing directions: to create a film that exposes the global capitalist culture of excess, that revels in its sort of surface glamour, and also provides an alternate conception of enjoyment through absence. That both Bob and Charlotte throughout the film are exposed to all of this luxury, all of this opulence, all of this excess, all of this consumption, but it's not making them happy. It's not comforting them. They're not good tourists. They've still got insomnia. They feel lost and alone, even if they have friends or partners or business associates, whatever it is, and they kind of come together out of this loneliness and learn that they can share something much more intimate and much more meaningful and much more resonant for both of them if they work against that giant global capitalist spectacle. So that's, and this, by the way, if you don't know, Todd McGowan's article from Quarterly Film and Video, There Is Nothing Lost in Translation, is widely considered to be the best piece written on it. I have some problems with it myself, but I think it certainly covers a lot of the really, really rich meanings about why we find this film so useful. So a little bit about the background of Lost in Translation. Sofia Coppola used it as her second feature. She'd made Lick the Stars, her short first, and then of course the scandalous and provocative Virgin Suicides that you'll hear about next week. And I hopefully I can come and hear what Jessica has to say about it. I'm excited. But when she started putting Lost in Translation together, there's a lot of gossip and a lot of celebrity jibber-jaw about it. But, oh, she was breaking up with Spike Jonze and she was having a nervous breakdown. None of that is true. She was breaking up with Spike Jonze. But she said, I wanted to make a love story that wasn't nerdy. I wanted to create a love story that had that genuine, intimate feel, but that wasn't something that was played out. And again, very rare for a script to be this short. She developed a 70-page scenario rooted in situations and improv. Some dialogue and some scenes were very carefully scripted, but others were just Charlotte and Bob meet at the bar. She makes fun of him, or Bob has a difficult conversation with his wife, or Bob receives a fax, and then she let Bill Murray do his thing and Scarlett Johansson do their thing. And while she is almost more interested in capturing the limits and the glamour of the hotel, the stars can really leap into doing to really practicing their craft. She developed it with Bill Murray in mind for Bob Harris, and famously hounded his 1-800 number. Bill Murray does not have an agent. He uses a 1-800 number to scan and kind of assess his projects. And she drove him crazy. And famously, no one knew if he was even going to show for the shoot. There was no contract until he showed up the day before the beginning of principal photography. And she said she was really, really relieved when he showed up. And I think he's never said anything but positive things about the making of the film. Charlotte's idiot husband is based on her own marriage to Spike Jonze. The famous interpreter scene where Bob is shooting the commercial for Suntory is a response to her father's own experience making a whiskey commercial with Akira Kurosawa. Both he and Kurosawa were in the commercial. It wasn't directed by Kurosawa. And then the marriage, a very, very traditional marriage that Charlotte sees at the Heian Temple is also inspired by Kurosawa's Fox Spirit Wedding in Dreams. And then, of course, we were talking about this earlier before things started up. Sausalito is probably the worst name for a lounge band ever. I have to give them credit for absolutely destroying Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. And that's interesting because as much as Bob and Charlotte are lost in translation trying to figure out how Tokyo works and how Japanese culture, which is so alien and so exotic for them and so different, as much as that's true, we get a taste of what it's like for them because we see this very, very bad version of a song that is considered kind of an American folk classic done as a jazz lounge standard. And it's painful. It's absolutely wretched to listen to. And that's kind of how they're feeling as they're trying to figure out this world that they do not know. So one of my favorite bits of trivia, though, is that the lounge singer's hair, which is a brutal burgundy, is meant to mirror the swatches that Bob's wife FedExes him overnight. So even though he's using the lounge singer as a sexual substitute for Charlotte, as soon as he thinks about the hair, he probably remembers the swatches, and it's one of his worst decisions, right? The Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen karaoke scene is actually based on one of Coppola's friends' versions of it. And she shot it on 35 millimeter, which is not a surprise, but her father really hounded her to get her to use high definition video because he thought it would be more modern. And I'm really glad that she didn't, because I don't think all of those flares in the lens would have worked quite as well. And then again, this is what I noticed about the structure of the film. All these long takes, but usually you use long takes with a big ensemble cast doing all kinds of crazy things. Citizen Kane, Ambersons, Lola Montez, stuff like that. Russian Ark, right? But long takes with solo performances in very flattened telephoto space. And they don't really do anything. They're acting for sure. There's not a lot of physical movement, not a lot of sound, not a lot of change. And then just before there seems to be some sort of resolution or some sort of continuity-based transition, she cuts. So we get this we get this very languorous effect, but it's also very anxious at the same time. It's kind of brilliant, and she uses that in a lot of her films, right? I also like to see where our principal actors were in their career. As we can see from Bill Murray on the left, the 5 films before Lost in Translation, a combination of art house cinema and just sort of general speaking parts, and even some voiceover stuff. Charlie's Angels and Hamlet in the same year. That's quite a combo. Osmosis Jones, Wes Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums, a small part in Speaking of Sex, and then Lost in Translation, which really his career had been boosted largely by Rushmore at first, which was 1998. But Lost in Translation really cements this new phase of highly psychic and psychological and chive-based kind of Bill Murray comedy that's also performance art, comedy that involves silences and pauses, things that he was never really known for before. And then you can see again that combination moving into time after Lost in Translation: Coffee and Cigarettes, Garfield, The Life Aquatic, Broken Flowers, Lost City. There's a real mixture, and we see that on the other side too with Scarlett Johansson, even though she's much younger. And her first film, 1999, on this list is my My Brother the Pig, which is a kid's movie. She's still just very, very young there. But then she goes right into working with the Coen brothers, with the man who wasn't there. She goes right into working on one of the great art films of the early 2000s, Ghost World. Bit parts in American Rhapsody and Eight-Legged Freaks, and then Lost in Translation really launches her career into the mainstream, but also into being an A-list glamorous star. Girl with a Pearl Earring, which I think might be her greatest performance ever, even though I love her in this as well. And then moving on from there. So you see one actor who is already, a very, very established and well-respected star, branching out and really taking some risks and really expanding his theatrical or his performative repertoire, and then another star with kind of a lightning fast leap into scenarios and subtexts and relationships that really would seem to be too young for her age, which is a horrible ageist thing to say. But Scarlett Johansson conquers every part she has, from Ghost World to the Black Widow and back. She is one of the hardest working, most seriously aware actresses I've seen in a long time. And of course, with all postmodern cinema, but especially with Sofia Coppola's cinema, we have all these hyper references and hyper allusions to other cinema. We could fold 25 films into Lost in Translation, but the ones that stand out the most, Love Affair with Charles Boyer, Casablanca for sure, Brief Encounter, The Third Man, because from The Third Man, she borrows the idea that not a lot of the Japanese is going to be translated. We don't get a lot of subtitles. There's even bits where Germans are talking and we don't have subtitles, so we don't really know what the hell they're saying either. So that idea of sticking a basically English language audience in a film with so much internationalism in it, so many different strange and unusual culture-based things going on, including, of course, dialogue in another language. It's disorienting and disarming. It's also quite exotic, just like the characters are experiencing it. Tokyo Story, of course, with her use of silences and spaces and objects. Roman Holiday with the idea of the sort of holiday romance. La Dolce Vita, which both Bob and Charlotte watch in the film. Godard's incredible Contempt, Le Mépris. We'll talk about how that fits in a minute. We can't look at the May-December romance without thinking of Woody Allen's Manhattan, although I think everything that is, and also the way that Sofia Coppola shoots Tokyo is very similar to the way Gordon Willis shoots Manhattan. But I think all the mistakes that Woody Allen makes in Manhattan are corrected in a very, very interesting gender political way by Sofia Coppola here. The Shining, because again, the hotel is kind of its own star. Wim Wenders' Tokyo Ga and Chungking Express from Wong Kar-wai, both films that Coppola said were very strong influences on the film. Before Sunrise, because again, we have this sort of unexpected, spontaneous tryst. And then the Bridges of Madison County, again, because of the older man and the younger woman finding a friendship, and then some. So all of this is sort of built into the backstory and the subtext of the film. So I'm just going to go through this quickly, just so you can see the original critical response. And as you can see from these two posters here, very different from the posters I opened the presentation with. Once a film catches on and it gets all the awards, that's all we see. This is, to me, it's always like looking at vets who have served in the military and who have earned all their honors and all the awards, and they have their massive fruit salad on their dress uniforms. That's how I look at posters like this. Like, yes, they've earned all these awards, there's no question, but we're kind of getting away from the art. We're kind of getting away from the incredible devotion to nation and to country that these people had, and we're sort of covering it with so much stuff. All right, so here we go. From The Guardian in 2003. Stripped to its core, Lost in Translation explains how two strangers thrown together in an unnerving, unfamiliar environment can save each other's lives. It is one of the few Hollywood films I have seen this year that has a brain, but more than that, it has a soul. The joy of filmmaking pervades the film. An instinctive understanding of the medium is evident. Sound is used so beautifully it takes your breath away. In a scene where Bob carries the dozing Charlotte to her room, the hotel corridor is gently dusted with oral density. The noise of air conditioners and fluorescent lights becomes part of the milieu, from the New York Times. She has one objective. She wants to show two people lonely in vast foreign Tokyo and coming to the mutual realization that their lives are stuck. Perhaps what they're looking for is the same thing I've heard we see in marriage, that we seek in marriage, a witness. Coppola wants to get that note right. I can't tell you how many people have told me that they just don't get Lost in Translation. They want to know what it's about. They complain nothing happens. They've been trained by movies that tell them where to look and what to feel, in stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Lost in Translation offers an experience in the exercise of empathy from Roger Ebert. And then the last one, second to last one, very much a mood piece. The film's deft balance of humor and poignancy makes it both a pleasurable and melancholic experience. There's nothing labored or forced in the exploration of the undefined yet intense relationship, and the insights about this type of brief but indelible memorable bond emerge quite casually. And then lastly, Lost in Translation emphasizes what is mimicked without understanding, what escapes translation. I'm just going to having a hard time seeing this. 1 second. There we go. Sensations of incomprehensible loss, of forgetting even the time of day, tend to dominate. These sensations, the film makes clear, can be highly pleasurable and even transformative when one is open to them. Such images revel in the feeling of lostness without attempt to muffle its shock with cheap humor. And then we're just going to look very, very briefly at the 4 scenes that people talk about the most. And I just want to show you how obsessed some people can be about them. Easily the most talked about scene in the film is the opening shot, the very controversial opening shot of Scarlett Johansson's derriere. And it is many things at once. It is one of the most ambivalent and interesting and engaging and frustrating shots in modern American cinema. It's a nuanced comment on the nature of this casual, intimate love story. It's a female director's purposeful appropriation of hetero male gaze and the erotic conquest it mandates. It's an anti-centerfold, right? It's an anti-pinup, because a pinup would be sort of this good girl thing, showing her full frontal, all this stuff. But it's kind of an anti-Playboy moment, right? Where yes, you can get turned on by it. There's something intimately sexy about a woman lying there in her underwear, but it's also just a person lying in the hotel room alone, resting. And that is how a lot of people also see it. It's also a sly quote from Godard's Contempt in its use of Brigitte Bardot's body as both spectacle and gender comment, and a statement about Johansson's performance and her character's bodily presence in the hotel. This is her coming of age film in many ways, even though she had played adult parts previously, but this is where she really becomes a full-blown sexual persona in this film. And it's also about this beautiful body is kind of kicked around in this hotel. She stubs her toe. She's never comfortable in the bed. She can't sleep. She stares out at a lot of things. And we never ever see her like this again. It's very fashion derived. Her knickers, as the British critics put it, are very, very stylish and very sensual, but it's also very anti-fashionable at the same time. It's just a person lounging comfortably in her clothing. And again, the film never objectifies her in this way. We see her in her pajamas, in her underwear, in different kinds of outfits, but never sexualized again. She's just comfortable and relaxed. So the anticipation of sexuality that the first shot sets up is very clearly toyed with and deconstructed as the film goes on. And yet people cannot get away from this shot. They recreate it over and over and over again. This is one graphic designer. There's a whole world, if you didn't know, of alternative movie posters, people who make their own posters because I think the real ones aren't good enough. So this guy, I don't know if it's a guy, I really don't know, I shouldn't say that. This creator keeps obsessing over this image, and he even includes the tagline, "I just don't know what I'm supposed to be." I think that fits for the shot as well. And I especially like this one where the landscape of her body is used to represent the landscape of Tokyo as well. That is kind of the double glamorous spectacle going on here, right? And then here are some of the other DIY posters that have been made to emphasize different parts of her personality. And this is really more how the film portrays her. Again, comfortably dressed, discreetly screened or phrased in the film, and then lots of fun with sort of 80s retro Patrick Nigel kind of design, and then the very, very phallic microphone from the karaoke scene where we're removing ourselves from her completely, or at least the need for her body. So I'm going to read through this because it's just so much fun. The famous scene where he and the director have this problem translating back and forth was actually translated in the New York Times. So you can see how this goes. And I'm going to do my best to act it out, but I'm not Bill Murray. So the director, the translation is very important. Okay, the translation. Yes, of course, I understand, says the interpreter. Mr. Bobson, you are sitting quietly in your study, and there is a bottle of Suntory whiskey on top of the table. You understand, right? With wholehearted feeling, slowly, look at the camera tenderly, as if you are meeting old friends. Say the words, as if you are Bogey in Casablanca, saying, cheers to you guys, Suntory time. He wants you to turn, look into the camera, okay? That's all he said? Yes, turn to camera. Does he want me to turn from the left or turn from the right? He, in very, very formal Japanese, he has prepared and is ready, and he wants to know when the camera rolls, would you prefer that he turn to the left or would you prefer that he turn to the right? And that is the kind of thing he would like to know, if you don't mind. Either way is fine. That kind of thing doesn't matter. We don't have time, Bob-san, okay? We need to hurry, raise the tension, look at the camera slowly, with passion. It's passion that we want. Do you understand? Right side, and with intensity. Is that everything? It seemed like he said quite a bit more than that. What are you talking about? It's not just whiskey, you know. Do you understand? It's like you are meeting old friends. Softly, tenderly, gently. Let your feelings boil up. Tension is important, don't forget. Like an old friend and into the camera. Okay, you understand? You love whiskey. It's Suntory time. Okay, let's roll. Start. For relaxing times, make it Suntory time. Cut. In this very, very dominating male voice. Don't try to fool me. Don't pretend you don't understand. Do you even understand what we are trying to do? Suntory is very exclusive. The sound of the words is important. It's an expensive drink. This is number one. Now do it again, and you have to feel that this is exclusive, okay? This is not an everyday whiskey, you know. Could you do it slower and with more ecstatic emotion, more intensity? Suntory time. For relaxing times, make it Suntory time. Cut. Bob, I'm begging you. And again, she actually wrote all the dialogue in English and then had it translated. So that the Japanese actors could do it that way. So we are so obsessed with this scene and its failed connections. It's failed connections for art, for commerce, for advertising. Bob wants to do a good job, so does the director. And there's something about the translator, the interpreter, who just doesn't get that one needs exact, precise, specific details, and the other needs to know that the actor is actually respecting him and trying to do it right. And that loss of respect, that loss of quality, of talent, of performance, that loss of connection between the two worlds is really what the whole film is largely about. But the other scene that is become more famous over time is the famous pillow talk scene, which is very interesting. The scene shows their eventual transition on the bed as Coppola explores the proximity of Bob and Charlotte's bodies. In many ways, we wanted them both to be together in bed from the beginning because they're falling in love. Bob begins this scene by lying down on his stomach at the foot of the bed, drinking sake with Charlotte, who sits on the floor on the left side of the bed. The following shot of the film is of Tokyo and is seen through Bob's hotel window. The camera pans and focuses on Bob and Charlotte's reflection. In this shot, Bob is still lying on his stomach, whereas Charlotte now sits on the bed. Charlotte comments that neither one of them should visit the city again because doing so would never be as much fun. The final shot of the scene consists of both characters lying on their backs together in bed. And this is, I think, brilliant criticism. Sofia Coppola creates an impossible scenario using the space of the hotel room. She brings two married people, puts them in bed together, and somehow makes the entire encounter feel innocent. There are no expectations, and the audience never assumes the characters will act on their feelings. The scene explores the innocent relationship between two new friends. And Stanley Kaufman of the New Republic says, it's an affair that is unconsummated and whose non-consummation is oddly gratifying, which I think is quite beautifully put. And then the most controversial moment of all, the last moment, which was done as improv. What does he say to her? I'm going to give you the best theories, and then I will tell you, I actually agree with Sofia Coppola. I think it doesn't matter. What matters is that he gets out of the car and says something, and that they embrace, and that then they leave. But here we go. The longest theory has been the first time anyone tried to figure it out on YouTube in 2007, because YouTube ruins everything, is I have to be leaving, but I won't let that come between us, okay? Which is kind of I think a dumb thing to say. The next theory from another YouTuber who fixed the first theory: promise me when John is ready for his next business trip, go up to that man and tell him the truth, okay? The current rating theory that we have been able to use with technology and why we're wasting technology figuring this out is beyond me. Promise me that the next thing you do is go up to that man and tell him the truth, okay? And of course she says, okay, back. The actual director's response: that thing Bill whispers to Scarlett was never intended to be anything. I was going to figure out later what to say and add it in, and then we never did. It was between them, just acknowledging that week that week meant something to both of them, and its effects them going back to their lives. People always ask me what's said. I always like Bill's answer, that it's between lovers, so I'll leave it at that. And that is, of course, I think the most romantic and also the most appropriate way to read it. But if you want to read against the text, you really got to know what every word is. There's some theories to play with. Okay. And again, the embrace, the intimate moment, the private moment between two people in a crowd of outsiders, a crowd of people in a culture they don't understand, that's much more significant and much more important than what the actual words are. And then again, I think it's more of a menage a trois than a romance. There's three of them there, and the Park Hotel is one of the characters. The director's love and fascination for Japan are evident in every frame, from the neon jungle aspect of Tokyo's congested streets to the occasional departures into the calm of its gardens and temples. And I'm almost done. Lost in Translation is littered with familiar signifiers from an unfamiliar Japan, streets ablaze with neon pictographs, bowing concierges bustling after guests in a high-tech hotel, pop star hipsters with multicolored hair sporting synthetic fashions, and then the Park Hyatt Hotel itself. This is actually Coppola herself speaking. I stayed there during the Virgin Suicides promotion press tour. It's just one of my favorite places in the world. Tokyo is so hectic, but inside the hotel, it's very silent. And the design of it is interesting. It's weird to have this New York bar, the jazz singer, the French restaurant, all in Tokyo. It's this weird combination of different cultures. And I think she both pays great respect to that and also parodies it in interesting ways. Bob's Tokyo and Charlotte's Japan are very different. Bob is always trapped by technology, confused by it, trapped in what he's doing there. He's forced to be on this TV show. He enjoys the karaoke with Charlotte, and he's really comforted when he can be in kind of both a father and a lover's role here, taking her back to her room safely after a night of carousing. But he's always looking out from cars, always trapped, always trying to have conversations that fail. Charlotte is much more open. She's not associated with machines as much as she is sounds and flowers and nature. And some of that is a bit stereotypical, but that's that's Charlotte's personality in the film as well, when she's playing with Japanese flower arranging, or she goes to the Heian temple and she leaves the traditional fortune slip on the tree. She sees the wedding. It's almost like Japan is welcoming her. And Bob is always feeling and physically out of place. He's always, being trapped in this sort of technophobic hell. The showers are too small. He stands out in the elevator like a sore thumb. Charlotte is more immersed, more enmeshed. She has her music she listens to. She travels more. She gets out more, and she's freer than he is, of course. But she's sort of exploring herself internally as she's exploring Kyoto and Tokyo externally. Bob doesn't have that kind of luck. He doesn't have that kind of experience there, which is why silence and sound and spirituality are also closely connected in the film. Clearly, something cathartic happens during those karaoke sessions. And again, he gets to play both father and lover in a very safe and reasonable way. And they never need to actually physically consummate what's going on between them. Along with fashion and photography and alcohol and everything else, Sofia Coppola is very, very deeply interested in the music industry. The soundtrack was hand-selected by her with some of her most interesting and avant-garde bands and sounds. It was, of course, an international bestseller. And when music is bad in the film, it stands out like really bad. Sausalito really blows, right? But then the thing I also find interesting is when you have a hyper-commercial film, even if it's trying to undermine or critique hyper-commerciality, we can't really help where things go wrong. So in a recent Record Store Day Premium, they actually produced the album on vinyl as kind of a retro thing, and used Scarlett Johansson's Behind as the very, very exciting and expensive special edition, which again makes us really much more aware of the ambivalence of the ruthlessness of commercial markets. I think this is exactly not what Sofia Coppola would have wanted to have happen with that shot, but it's just one more kind of irresistible and guaranteed kind of indictment of any kind of authenticity or privacy or sanctity when it comes to the female body and marketing, right? So we certainly see that there. And then I'm going to close with this. There's been a lot of criticism of the film for its portrayal of the Japanese as racist. In fact, it really influenced the Oscars as well. So I'm just going to go over here for a second. Its humor did not translate well with Japanese audiences. The film's Japanese distributor opted for a delayed opening at a single Tokyo movie theater with a website trailer as its sole advertisement. Local critics were not laughing either. Yoshiri Toshura called the film stereotypical and discriminating. The writer Kotaro Sawaki noted that the Japanese characters are consistently portrayed as foolish, and indeed the film's Orientalism, its use of exoticism for the benefit of Caucasians, is marked enough to have prompted the Los Angeles-based nonprofit organization Asian Media Watch to launch a campaign against its 4 Academy Award nominations. But there's some resistance to that as well, and some really intelligent discussion can talk about how this racism is being used. There are racist moments in the film. This scene at the sushi bar, you don't ever want to irritate or insult a sushi chef, right? They're part of their job is about being friendly and personable. And he says horrible things to him. Oh, you have black toe? How about black toe? Right? He makes fun of their voices, of their syntax, of their languages, of their supposed exoticism and bizarre fetishes. But when you are in another country, and it's frustrating for you too. You don't know the rules, you don't know the language, you don't feel comfortable. I think it's a very honest portrayal of the xenophobia and confusion that goes on when you're traveling abroad. And every once in a while, that erupts into something that's pretty darn offensive. And I'm not justifying the offensiveness, but I think Coppola is showing us that these people have reached a point where they want some familiarity and they can't have it. Thus the black toe stuff. So the city, along with the country more generally, and those of its people who are represented, is structurally located as other to the protagonist. And I think that's throughout their love story, a position from which some degree of reductive stereotyping easily results. And again, Todd McGowan has a really smart way of looking at this. The Tokyo of Bob and Charlotte is one beset by a fundamental emptiness at the heart of its excesses. And I think we see that through all of the emphasis on the glamour and the glitz in the media. It is the focus on the role of absence in Tokyo that saves Lost in Translation from the charge of racism that we might at first be tempted to level at the film. In fact, by emphasizing the absence that lurks beneath every cultural excess, Coppola attempts to undermine the psychic position that informs racism. So yes, we do see the characters certainly abuse different Japanese people that they meet, especially in the service industry. But Coppola is not celebrating that at all. I think she's showing them as sort of desperate and lost and in need of help. So that's what I have for everybody. Thank you all very much. Questions or karaoke, and it's Centauri time.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
We've got one question already, and if everybody wants to add whatever questions you might have, feel free to do so while I'm talking. One thing I was kicking myself for leaving out, I meant to say in the introduction, but failed. When I initially contacted Dan, I was like, hey, when Marks were doing Sofia Coppola, do you want to get on board? Dan's response was, yeah, I love Lost in Translation, but shouldn't you get a feminist film theorist to do it? And my response was, no, if you love it, go ahead and do it. So if you're wondering why there are two stinky boys talking about, one of the greatest female directors of American history, I apologize. That is my mistake. And also the feminists are coming. They're coming to rescue us in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks from now and 3 weeks from now, we'll have feminist film theorists who will tear us stinky boys apart.
Well, and I'll be right there to enjoy that too. So
yeah, you won't be on camera. I will be.
No, okay.
So yeah, I'll be. Yeah. Anyway, it will be fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Our first question from the audience is from Noelle Jones. Mm-hmm. She says, why do you think that as viewers, we're so quick to forgive Bob for his infidelities with the Sausalito singer? Is it more so Coppola's ingenuity as a writer-director, Bill Murray's acting ingenuity, or something else?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question. And I'm not sure I forgive him for that. I'm not sure that I forgive him for his infidelity at all. I think the only thing I can forgive, and I think in a lesser film, this would have happened. He brings her home, he tucks her into bed. He's clearly aroused by her. She's clearly aroused by him, but he's being very responsible and very no means no kind of, and he walks away. And this is where his real sexual attraction for her begins. He calls his wife. It's a desperate, painful, awful phone call. He even says, well, that was a bad idea. And then the film sort of throws the Sausalito singer at him. She's clearly only in it for the room service and the champagne. This is clearly a routine she uses all the time. And there is not a single indication that he enjoys a moment of that tryst. As soon as he wakes up, he kind of regrets it all. I think through Charlotte, he is trying to bring some intimacy and some honesty back into his relationship with his wife. It's hard that she wants to talk about kids and remodeling, and he's worried about his career, and he feels like he's kind of a hack and a sellout. But he says, I want to eat, I want to be healthier. I want to eat, I don't want any more of that heavy pasta. And I think he realizes that really the whiskey has done him great disservice here. We never see that singer again. We just hear her. And I'm pretty sure that Charlotte doesn't forgive him at all, right? She even says, well, she's more your age. And they have that terrible shabu shabu meal where everything goes really, really badly. I think a lot of it is that Bill Murray's character, Bill Murray's acting, we have sympathy from this guy all the way through. Here's another thing. We've had that sequence set up because he has, as far as we can tell, he's turned down the terrible stereotype prostitute as well. The lick lick my nylons, tear my nylons, whatever it is. He's clearly not interested in that. He's not a sensualist. He's not there just to indulge and to, run amok through the excesses of Tokyo. He's really embarrassed by the prostitute and kind of wants her to leave, and things go really wrong there. I think we forgive him just because in some ways it's this desperate, pathetic substitute for a lot of other decisions that could have been a lot worse. And I don't think, he's certainly drinking when he does it. And I don't think we should forgive him completely for it either, because his wife looks like a pretty decent person. She even says, should I worry about you? This is long distance and we're kind of past it now. We don't really have that romance going anymore, but I still care about you and I still don't want you to be, miserable. And you're having a nervous breakdown or a midlife crisis, which is a joke that Charlotte has with him. And I think we can accept what he does as a miserable substitute that will make him more miserable until he and Charlotte can communicate and decide that they are going to be in bed together. They're going to be close. They're going to be intimate, but we don't need to have anything actually physical going on. That they've shared these spiritual and enduring and valuable moments together. And they don't necessarily need the sex to do it. So that would be my answer, but I'm curious to see what other people think too.
We'll see. You can, if you would like to answer that question for yourselves, please do put it in. I guess the chat is probably the best place to go with those. I made a whole list. What's that?
Yeah, no, go on.
Okay. I made a whole list of questions to ask you, but you addressed most of them in your presentation. I did want to return to one, and I've got another one from the audience while we're waiting for maybe some chat to come up. You were talking about where this film came in Bill Murray's career, and I think that's very interesting. He wasn't fresh off Rushmore, but it's pretty shortly after Rushmore, and then right after this, he made Broken Flowers. So it's kind of positioned among like the great Bill Murray roles. But I think what's interesting is that for the most part, and we can debate this, he is still playing kind of the Bill Murray character. It's in different contexts.
Yes.
But I think now that we've got the benefit of hindsight, this seems like the ultimate Bill Murray role. It was the only time he was nominated for an Oscar. He was expected to win, but wound up losing to Sean Penn for Mystic River, which was a mistake, but that's a complaint for another time.
Everything about Mystic River is a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. But yeah, I'm wondering what it is, if you can help elucidate why this is the one that stuck. Like, why is this the best Bill Murray performance?
Oh, well, there's lots of reasons, and I love the way you set it up. First of all, this is exactly the kind of performance that the Academy loves to celebrate, right? It's all character acting, but not. So it's branching out from your star, your star celebrity. What people expect from Bill Murray is here. It checks all the boxes, but some of the boxes are different sizes, and some of the boxes are much more complicated than we're willing to admit right away. The main poster, the most prominent poster in America actually was him sitting there in his slippers. It was not Scarlett Johansson. She hardly appeared on any posters until after all the awards came through. So it was all about seeing Bill Murray in a movie like Caddyshack in Tokyo, right? Or, Ghostbusters with whiskey or something like that. That's what people expected to see. And the fact that he has such a range and that Coppola allows him these moments of improv, which is what he's in his best is when he's doing improv, right? Those little one-liners and things. Very Groucho Marx kind of characterization, where he sort of throws out these little asides at random, and they really, really stick. And allowing him scenarios where he's already reacting very, very dynamically to tensions, creative tensions that are surrounding him. Like the two scenes I'm thinking of, the one is right here when he's having problems with the translation with the director, but the other one is when he's in the bar and the two sort of privileged jocks come up to him and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's him," and he's like, "Yeah, I gotta go." Right? There's a kind of shove off. You're really irritating me and you're being very offensive, even though I'm rich and famous and you're not. There's a kind of attitude about fame there that I think really weighs on him. And he also, as much as Bill Murray has been a star and a hugely popular actor, he hasn't had a lot of romantic leads. So this is a great chance for him to really show that he has a very different kind of charisma. And I mean, there's a lot of method acting in his comedy also. And what better method actor to play off of than Scarlett Johansson? Like she has a purpose and she has a motivation that she builds into every character that is so rich and so strong. So they're both playing with a lot of subtext. All those little glances, those little touches back and forth when she's singing the Pretenders, "I'm special," and he's like, "Special." In some ways, that's so pathetic that you want to cry a little bit, but it's also so cute and so powerful and so true. That's the kind of moment that I think got him the Oscar nomination. And yeah, the fact that Sean Penn got it is completely ridiculous.
We're running out of time. We'll do a last call for questions in the Q&A, and I've got one more in front of me already.
Great.
So yeah, if you
thank you everyone, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. If you were in the audience and wanted to get a last minute question in, now's your last chance. But the one that I've got is from Jessica. She wants to know, Charlotte is honest about not knowing her path in life. She's lost internally in a way that mirrors the external situation at hand. Sophia herself experimented with many different arts and career paths before pursuing filmmaking full time. How much of Sophia do you think is in Bob and Charlotte?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Oh, the flat answer, the sort of press answer is that many people have read the film as a sort of kiss off to Spike Jonze. But that's not really true, because Charlotte's husband is hardly around, right? The biggest kiss off is that he doesn't really play a very big part. He's sort of sort of innocuous and self-obsessed. He chastises her for being too intellectual, for being too smart. That's never a good idea for anybody. But the other larger argument, I think this fits into your question, is a lot of people are now reading the film as a statement about Sophia's relationship with her father. And I think that's where it gets really, really interesting. Like, yes, Dad, you're the great God filmmaker, the Godfather filmmaker of the 70s. Although you're also responsible for one from the Heart, which I think this movie shares a lot with. Actually, I think this in many ways, some of the Tokyo scenes are sort of taking Dad's stuff and rearranging it in neat and interesting and more beautiful ways. But that scene where Bob is carrying Charlotte to bed, that's very much a statement about Sophia and her father. You know, as you said, she experimented with photography, with fashion, with architecture, with acting, and we don't talk about that. Neither does she. But there's kind of a sense of Dad always sort of guided me. Dad took care of me. Dad wasn't around a lot. Dad has a lot of money, and that gives me a lot of privilege. And I think that's where we go when we look at something like Marie Antoinette. So much of it is about, kids who grow up without consequences, and you kind of do anything, and of course they get bored and they get decadent, and they just don't know the repercussions of what they're doing. There's a little bit of that here, but we're sort of constructing our own home out of the hotel, and I think there's a lot of that in Charlotte, of course, where she's sitting there listening to the self-help tape or the guidance CD or whatever it is. She is, most people, when they say, "Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do," it's kind of a pretentious thing to say. When Charlotte says it to Bob, I think there's a sincerity there that he recognizes from his own kids. And he says, there's that bit where he's very parenting, right? She says, "I don't like what I write. Everything I write is crap." And he says, "Keep writing. Just keep doing it, right? You'll find your thing. And yeah, marriage is hard. And yeah, kids are hard. But you'll find out that it's worth it." There's those moments that would sound really, really fake and really false if Clint Eastwood said them, or God help us, Mel Gibson or Sean Penn said lines like that. Oh my gosh. Or Kevin Costner, they would be so flat. But Bill Murray is so subtle and so nuanced. And I think there's a lot of Coppola's direction and guidance, allowing those actors to find their own characters in really, really quiet, silence-driven ways, where those little intimate moments, something someone says to you, maybe even it's not even all that important to them, but it sticks with you in a big way. I think she wanted to capture those moments on top of all the luxury and the opulence and the privilege. And I think she's realizing in this film especially that film is where she's going to do it. And a lot of that is thanks, Dad, and a lot of that is your stuff's really dated and sexist, Dad. So both those things are going on. And she forges her own film language, which is phenomenal, maybe one of the best that we have. So I hope I answered your question. I think I can close.
I was thinking during the presentation, and it's kind of to the point of the question, I definitely have seen this read before as Scarlett plays Sophia and Giovanni Ribisi plays Spike Jonze. And then, of course, 2 years ago, Scarlett Johansson was Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Adam Driver was Noah Baumbach in Marriage Story.
Right.
But Arif to take Spike Jonze, of course, made her, and he wrote that screenplay himself. And Scarlett Johansson is the voice of the machine. So is Sophia Coppola the machine? I never thought about that before.
Yeah, well, I mean, and they're all. I mean, what is filmmaking? What is professional filmmaking? Well, is Hollywood, especially A-list Hollywood. I mean, there's just as much cross-marketing going on as there is cross-pollination of relationships and cross-pollination of creativity. So they're all sharing different ideas in the same way, and that's one of the wonderful things about really the great thing about cinema is that it has to be collaborative, and there has to be a lot of trust, and sometimes that trust turns into love, and sometimes that love goes sour, and sometimes we can map it all and do things like this and share ideas with all the people who come and experience it. I think in this case the gossip for the film and all the celebrity backstory is very, very significant, but I think the real joy of the film is in seeing this story, this very, very unorthodox love story where an older man and a younger woman can become more than friends without anything prurient or offensive or disgusting, that she can hop around in her undies in this whole film and it's never really objectifying, that he can care for her and love her and go back to his life with his wife in a fairly responsible, honest way, despite the redheaded Sausalito person, which is I think going to haunt him for a long, long time, honestly. And again, is a huge part of celebrity culture. But it's one of our greatest love stories because it's such a unique portrayal of such a unique relationship.
We're actually a little bit over our allotted time,
Oh.
so we need to give up there. But thank you so much, Dan. I had a really good time. I've been looking forward to it so much, and you did not disappoint me. So,
well, thank you for asking me, Pete, and thank you all for coming. I'm very grateful that you would spend Thursday night with us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and next week, come back for Taylor Grunlow on the
Please.
suicides. Yeah, it'll be lots of fun. So until next week.